I've never seen anyone leave because you've communicated to them too much, but I've seen them leave because there's no communication or very little.
Welcome back to NeuroConversant Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication, especially in the STEM workplace or any place that has neurodivergent people. With us today is Joe Fields. Joe is an author and a coach, and I'm going to let him explain a little bit more about what he does. Joe, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me, Jeremy. I am a small business and performance coach. I predominantly work with small businesses, helping the CEOs and management curtail some of their extravagant expenses. I recently saved one of my clients over 150,000 the first 6 weeks I was there.
Nice.
And I focus on the culture, the team building, and leadership. Those are the three areas that I try to focus on, obviously, because I have a 30-year background in accounting and finance as a controller. That helps me tremendously because I know how to look at the numbers and help them and find things.
Great. How does building teams help with the money savings, or are they two separate things?
No, they definitely are not. They're very much connected. And I think the way they're connected is this: if you work better, you're more efficient. If you're more efficient, you save money. My background, as I said, as a controller, some of the things that used to be difficult in small companies, and when I say small, I predominantly worked with companies anywhere from about 3 million all the way up to 100 million. And one of the companies that I worked with, they were doing 6 million when I first got there. And when I left 8 years later, they were doing 30 million in that particular role as the controller there, because small companies back in the day couldn't afford to have HR people. So your controller was actually your finance guy, your banking guy, and your HR person. And embarrassingly enough, if you knew me, I had to handle technology too. So I was great at asking questions and getting the right people to coach me and get me in the area. But one of the things I found was that if you don't work together, it just costs the ownership so much money. And the only way to get people to work together is to have the right culture of trust.
I like it. I've had other guests on here who talk about trust and psychological safety in the workplace, and I've written some articles on it, and it sounds like a nice thing, like, oh, psychological safety. It sounds kind of woo woo.
Right.
But if you don't have it, like you said, people aren't going to share their ideas and they're not going to take risks if they don't feel safe. So it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay. The name of the book is The Bucket List Coach: How to Create a High Performance Championship Culture in Your Business. And the reason I wrote the book, I think there's a book inside all of us, and it was dying to come out. The title, The Bucket List Coach, comes from when I turned 60. I had some time in the office one day and I was looking at a website and I just kind of was killing time to take a break from what I was doing. And they had this bucket list thing that you filled out what yours were. Well, most people can be anywhere from I want to find the woman or man of my dreams. I want to travel the Nile. I want to go on the Amazon trip, or I want to go to Europe. Whatever your case, but mine was from the time I was 13 years old was to go to the University of Alabama and see a football game.
Nice.
And the reason was that I had spent a year in Arkansas visiting and living there with family. And one of the coaches there was friends with the legendary Bear Bryant. At the time, I had no idea that Bear Bryant was at Alabama or anything else. So, long story short, on my 60th birthday, I'm filling this thing out. I make up my mind, this is what I want to do. So I decided around October to go to the University of Alabama to see a game. It turned out to be a life changing experience. Now, that may sound crazy a little bit, but the reason I say that is because you hit a point in your life where you say to yourself, did I make the right choice of what I'm doing? And I had always felt in the back of my mind that, you know what, I would have really been a decent high school football coach and a history teacher. So while I was there and I had an amazing trip there, and I write about it in the book, as I'm sitting in the airport leaving, I'm thinking to myself, wow, that was amazing. That was terrific. Boy, did I really screw up. I think I could have done this. I love coaching. I love working with people. I love bringing the best out of them. And I just had a shot at doing I love history. And when I got back to New Jersey here on the Jersey Shore, I happened to be looking at a Tony Robbins infomercial. And I had been a big Tony Robbins fan. And I started thinking to myself, you know what? I've been a coach all my life. I've coached my kids, I've coached other kids all the way through 15, 16 years old in a variety of sports. I've been in business for 30 years. Little did I know that while I was training people, I was actually coaching them in some areas. So they melted together. And I said to myself, you know what? This controller thing is going to wind down eventually. And as it turned out, 3 or 4 years later, it actually did. But I love the coaching thing. So I went out, I took a ton of classes and things, got educated, was fortunate enough to meet people like you, Jeremy, and sit in on conversations and learn a little bit more. And then I went out there and I started working with small companies. And that's where I am now. Hope that wasn't too long for you.
No, that was great. And you said you blew it because you didn't do the thing earlier, but you're doing it now. And you know the saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So
I like that.
it's never too late. Um,
Absolutely.
so is the name the bucket list because that's how you started getting into coaching, or is there something about a bucket list that is integral to how you coach people?
Well, it really was because that's how I got into coaching. But the more I think about it, if you're an owner and you and I had a previous conversation about the greater fool and all of that theory that I actually a chapter in the book. And basically, I think people, especially in smaller companies, if you want to go out and start your own company, there has to be a little bit of a greater fool in you. And what I mean by that is you believe where everyone else out there thinks you're going to fail, but you keep going. You're the one that's sitting at the kitchen table at night trying to figure out how I'm going to meet payroll. No one else thinks you can. In fact, even your wife or your husband may be telling you, you know what? Let's just get a job. We really don't need this. But the greater fool and people like the greater fool believe that, you know what? I can do it no matter what the odds. I think I like that concept because 90% of the companies, 95% of the companies in the United States are small companies and they hire so many people. And because I like to say I'm seasoned, I have found that I've seen people lose their job. I've seen successful companies and I've seen companies fail. A lot of that has to do with the top. So working with people at the top and helping them be better coaches because that's part of it. They need to have a little coach in them. I heard an interesting phrase the other day of all people. Tom Brady was talking about the Patriots, and we've heard of the chief operating officer, the chief financial officer, the CEO, the CMO, but Tom Brady used the phrase the chief accountability officer. And when you think about it, when you're at the head of a team, you are the bottom line. As President Truman said, the buck stops with you. If you're in charge of the project, you are the chief accountability officer. If you're the CEO or owner of a small company or even a big company, it all stops with you.
Accountability is such a crucial thing. When I'm talking to relatively newer managers, I tell them people would rather work for a boss that they don't like, but they know what to expect than someone that they liked, but don't know, even if it means holding their employees accountable and holding their feet to the fire when something goes wrong or productivity is not where it needs to be. People actually, in the long run, appreciate being held accountable. It just takes a little bit more work upfront to set the expectations correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of that also is trust is so hard to get and so easy to lose. And if you can build a culture of trust, I like the idea that Ray Dalio, one of the most successful investors in the world, um, his philosophy is idea meritocracy, and I love it. You sit in a circle and you talk about things regardless of title, and everybody makes suggestions and they give you feedback, not criticism, feedback. And I think if you can develop that type of culture where your subordinates feel that we're all part of the same team, we're all working for the same purpose, I think you stand a much better chance of saving money, of being successful, and keeping people. And that's key.
Are there certain steps that you have executives that you're coaching in order to help them build a culture of trust?
One of the first things I say is, and it's an overused phrase, is that there has to be clear communication. I like to tell some of the owners that I've worked with, I've never seen anyone leave because you've communicated to them too much, but I've seen them leave because there's no communication or very little. If I don't know what you want, clearly defined standards and out, not rules, because rules, one of my old favorite guys, Kenny Stabler, used to say, rules were meant to be broken. Standards are something that the team will actually hold everybody else to. So if you can establish standards and a culture and you have the backing of the people at the top, there's no telling how far you can go. But one of the things that I look at when I talk to someone about, hey, listen, where do we start? Well, you start with your purpose. And you have to have a purpose. I'm a big Simon Sinek person. I love his books, The Infinite Game, Start with Why, things like that. And in his book, Start with Why, he talks about the golden circle. And that if you start with why you're doing something or your purpose, either or, and then you develop goals, and then you align your actions with those goals, and you develop a process, you're on your way. But if you don't communicate all of that and what that process is going to be, you know, the measurables are very important and people have to understand what the measurables of the job are.
There are exit interviews of people when they leave companies all the time. And the number one complaint of everyone who leaves a company is lack of communication. And sometimes it's lack of it completely. Sometimes it's not sharing the right information, but communication is the number one thing that makes people leave organizations. But communicating with people in the way that works for them, I think is really important. And it's often overlooked because some people like talking in person, some people like the phone, some people like emails. And one of the big complaints within that communication of people leaving, and like number 5 on the list was that my boss won't talk to me in person. He will only send emails. So I think it's really important to understand your team. And then some people will not talk on the phone. They just don't like it. So understanding your team and how to best communicate with them, I think, is often overlooked.
Well, I agree 100%. Maybe it's because of my age. Maybe it's because I actually worked in an office before there were emails and things like that, or at least readily used things like that. But I found myself when you can. Now, obviously, if you're in Rhode Island, I'm here on the Jersey Shore. It's kind of hard for me to walk out of my office and go down the hall and talk to you. So, but it's not hard to pick the phone up, or it's not hard to get on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. And I found that you can go back and forth with emails, back and forth, and something's lost in transition and all that. And I'm just a big fan of, you know what? If it's a critical issue, or even if it's not, if it's important enough to take the time to go back and forth 3 or 4 times, pick the phone up and say hi. Pick it up and just say, hey, listen, I know there must be something lost in the transition because you're a smart guy and I'm still working on being smart. So maybe together we can figure this thing out quickly. because
Yeah.
what you call accountable and I call accountable might be two different things.
Yeah. And one thing I've found is that a miscommunication that starts over text or email will never get resolved from the text or the email. Once things start going sideways, like you said, pick up the phone and talk about it rather than trying to fix it in the medium that caused the problem.
Yeah. I have a quick story about miscommunication and things taken written communication in the wrong way. One of the clients that I was working with, the CEO, I was in his office when he wasn't there one day and we were talking about things and he had been complaining to me about working with some of the people and he had mentioned to me that you know what they just don't get it. I don't understand what I have to do and I said to him, I said, "Well, you're sitting down with him, right?" "Well, no, I just sent an email to him." I saw him in the hall and I mentioned it to him. And I said, "Okay." And I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about this. So I write on the board a phrase that I thought about and I've been using from time to time. And what it is that your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. So I wrote it down at the bottom of this whiteboard that his desk faces. And I don't think anything more about it. I'm going to talk to him about it. It's just kind of a note, and he'll ask me about it. So a day goes by, I come back in because I was working a couple of days a week in the office there. And he and I are talking. I said, I see you erase what I said. What did you think? I was insulted. I can't believe you said that to me. I said, I didn't say it. I wrote it, and it wasn't to you. It was a note to let you know that, if you don't show people what you're thinking and how you're feeling, they're not hearing your words because we're more visual than we are audio. But in the meantime, I had insulted him, but fortunately, we had a great relationship and he started laughing. He said, "Oh my God, okay."
Yeah. For me, I've got a very resting neutral face. So there are times when I'll say something that's important or like emotionally charged, but I don't show it and
Right.
people don't really believe it. So I have to make sure if I'm saying something to let them know as much as possible what I'm saying is actually very important because my face just doesn't show it. So for a lot of people, that's true. Some people are very, flamboyant gesture with their hands. You can always tell their face, and some of us just are not. And it doesn't always go well. I think I'm being perfectly clear.
Mm,
Sometimes I'm not.
yeah, I can understand. I'm the opposite. People say that when I was working in accounting and finance, they used to say, "You're the opposite of a bean counter." Said, "Well, thank you. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not, but thank you." But I always joked and said, "Well, you know what? I spent 8 years digging holes and welding pipe and things like this while I was going to school at night. I'm a blue collar guy who just happens to be doing a white collar job."
Nice. Always take it as a compliment. That's my motto. Whether if I'm not sure if it's a compliment or an insult, my life's better if I assume it's a compliment. So that's what I go with.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah. What are some other struggles that you see owners of small businesses have? Because it really is generally they're very good at some technical thing, and then they start a business and they have to do all the other things that they weren't planning on. What are some of the hurdles you see most commonly?
The most common one I see is because they've worked so hard to get to that point. No one's gonna care as much as them. No one's gonna do it better than them, regardless of the job. And they have a tendency to put their arms around everything, and releasing control is very difficult for them. Well, I know. I jokingly said to a very successful owner of 15, 20 different dealerships when I was in that arena, and we were having a conversation, and he said, "I've run 15 different companies." And I said, I'll use a different name, "Pete, you own 15 different companies. You know the automotive industry, but you really don't understand how to work computers and how they have to interface with third-party softwares. Nor do I, but I don't try to do it. You just gotta, you know, let the cooks cook, let the patrons eat, and let's work it that way."
It's so hard to give up control. And I see it with new managers all the time. And What I will often tell them is, you know how much pride you took in doing the thing, say was cooking, how much pride you took in cooking a good dish? You can no longer take pride in that. You now take pride in having someone else make that dish. And it's a
Yeah.
hard mental transition for people to make.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. And when you're talking about money, it's one if you're talking about a passionate, uh, uh, hobby, it's hard enough to kinda give a little bit of that away. But if you're talking about your life's blood and you know that there are 30 or 40, 100 people relying on you on Friday to get a paycheck, that's a lot of pressure in itself. And
Yeah.
I hate to break it to any business owner, but know the number of people that are gonna care about your business as much as you do are minimal. However, if you've got the right environment and the right culture and you treat people with respect, and like we like to say, you get the right people on the right bus and the right seat, you're going to find that people, not only when they do leave for whatever reason, they come back and say hi. I always judge a company by how many times I see someone who used to work there walk through the door.
Oh, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that before. You may not have many people who care about the whole company as much as you do, but if you empower someone and give them control of a division or a segment or a project, that is then their project.
Mhm.
And they are now the ones who care the most about that thing. So empowering people and delegating well will get them to the point where they care as much as you do, just maybe about different things. So sadly, we're starting to run out of time. I'm wondering if you can let people know where they can reach out, find more about you, and find out more about your book.
Sure. My book's on Amazon, The Bucket List Coach: How to Create a High Performance Championship Culture in Your Business. And I think you'll find something in there. There's stories and things that'll help you with the small business and with leadership and building cultures and teams. You can also go to my website, which is thebucketlistcoach.com. And if you're a small business and you're curious about any part of small business and that type of thing, or performance, and you've got managers that you think they want to get to another level. I offer free consultations. We can talk about it. We might have a fit, we might not. You just may find the conversation interesting enough to pick up my book.
Perfect. And then before we wrap up, what is one piece of communication advice you think everyone can benefit from?
More than less, more communication than less communication. And honestly, crystal clear. Okay, transparency is the key to communication. People know when you're lying, and if you deceive people, you're going to lose people. And that's your most valuable asset.
All right. Communicate more and more honestly. I love it.
Absolutely.
All right, Joe.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you, share this episode with one person on your team who might benefit from it. And if you're leading a technical team and want to explore how these communication principles could work in your organization, visit www.neuroconversantleadership.com to learn more. And there you can reach out to schedule an appointment. I'd be happy to talk through what might be going on in your world. See you next week.